Thank you for joining us. The team at Herzog Global wanted to give everybody a little pre-Hanukkah treat with an amazing shiur from Rabbi Menachem Leibtag. Following this, I'm going to have a short taking some of the big ideas that we'll pay attention to while we're listening to the shiur, and talking about how we can form them into lesson plans that you can use in your classroom from those of you who are teaching. And so with that, I think we'll jump right in. Rabbi Leibtag, we're so happy to have you here.
Okay, good. I want to begin with what I like to call trigger questions to get things started. I want someone to tell me two different reasons for why we celebrate Hanukkah that almost every student will tell you. We celebrate Hanukkah. What are the two main mitzvot of Hanukkah that we all know?
Lighting the candles.
Lighting candles.
The oil, for the oil.
Hello.
And what's the second one? What else changes in our prayer service on that besides lighting Hanukkah candles?
Hallel.
Yeah. You have Hallel and Alanissim. In other words, we have a prayer element. We have something we do in shul and something we do at home, pretty much. Now, are there any other miracles in Jewish history that because of the miracle, we instituted a holiday, just because of that miracle? Can you name one? Okay, Purim. Okay, but I want something not in Tanakh. Okay, there's a reason there's quiet, because there aren't any. In other words, now, were there any other miracles that happened in Jewish history? There's many, aren't there? But usually, if a miracle happened sometime in Jewish history, that's not a reason to establish a holiday. Now, let's take the other side. A very good then about Yom HaTzvaot. That's up for grabs in the meantime. Didn't you say you're from Muncie, Lynn? Where's okay. I'm not sure everyone in Muncie was held by Yom HaTzvaot. Okay. Now, there are also many military victories in Jewish history, and we didn't establish a holiday every time there's a military victory, correct? So what I want to focus on this year, what makes Hanukkah, what makes it a rabbinic holiday? Because I'm pretty sure it's the first rabbinic holiday that's not mentioned in Tanakh. So there must be something very special about it. In fact, I think it's the only, maybe Yom HaTzmaut if we consider that. But I'll give you an example. On Hanukkah, we make a blessing on the menorah that what? I mean, on the Chanukiah, that it's a rabbinic command or a divine command to light the menorah?
Divine.
Yeah. Now, did any student ever ask that question, or any child? Remember, we're lighting a Chanukiah. It's a story that happened in the middle of the Second Temple period, way after the Bible was written, and we're making a blessing that God commanded us to light the menorah, the Chanukiah. Now, and that's like a great trigger question, isn't it? If we're teaching halakha. But that's not going to be our topic today. I just want to point out that Hanukkah, if I'm not mistaken, is the first rabbinic holiday. The goal of the shiur basically today is to try to show you that it might not actually be just a rabbinic holiday, it might be actually biblical. And that's what I'm trying to show you how and why. Now, one last opening question. Have you ever been on a tour in Israel or anywhere where they show you this wall and that wall, and they say, oh, this is Crusader time period, this is early Bronze, this is Iron Age, this is Byzantine? Anyone familiar with that? Now, the tour guide is assuming what? That when he says Iron Age, you know what he's talking about. But 9 out of 10 people on the tour have no idea what the Iron Age is, correct? They've heard of it. They don't know where it stands. And you might hear Byzantine, Crusader, and stuff like that. You know maybe they were Christian, but you have no idea when they were. Now, why do I point that out? Whenever you teach something that's based on Jewish history, the teacher is usually assuming way more than the students know. And sometimes, but if you go into the history too much in detail, you're going to lose them altogether. So you always have to think ahead of time that what history to talk about. Now, let's go in my introduction and talk about our first topic, which is when in Jewish history is the story of Hanukkah, the so-called miracle of Hanukkah. When in Jewish history does it take place? Someone want to just make sure we're all on the same page? Give me an example. When in Jewish history is the second? Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Greek rule.
Is it
Syrian Greek, Second Temple period.
Yeah,
Greek
Second
rule.
Temple period. Yeah. Syrian Greek, very good. The Seleucids. Okay. Now, I could throw out the 164 BCE. So some of you, that makes a lot of sense too. Your students will have no idea what you're talking about when you say 164 BCE. I'm just bringing an example of that. Therefore, if I'm going to teach, now, if I had 3 hours, I'd spend, that's the first part of our source sheet. I have a timeline of the key events of the Second Temple period, but that would take me 45 minutes to cover. I'm pointing out, I'm just going to assume we heard of the Second Temple period, and we'll go from there. Now, my final opening question. Someone explained to me why it's totally by chance that Hanukkah is on the 25th of Kislev. That was the date. Why is that date simply by chance?
Could it be that was the date where the winter solstice would be like the darkest day?
No, wait, you're jumping ahead. Give me the classic reason why Hanukkah is on the 25th of Kislev. There's a famous midrash, everyone.
Because they Chanu B'Kafeh. They stopped fighting, right?
Most
But I
students
listened to a different shiur last year. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Chanu B'Kafeh means they were what? They rested from battle on the 25th of Kislev. Agreed?
Right.
And therefore,
Yes,
it's almost by chance. Had the battle happened a different day, could have been any day of the year. It's the classic understanding. Most students, right, and most people in assuming Hanukkah is by chance, and the reason for the holiday is because of either the military victory or the menorah lighting for 8 days and things like that. That's fine. I want to show you there's a little more depth to the date and the time of year, and which adds to the other things that if you teach this in America or in a Christian society, what's everyone know? That Hanukkah and Christmas come out the same time of year. Which, again, why would that be totally by chance? If you know your Christianity. In other words, what are they celebrating? They're celebrating his birth, aren't they?
Oh, his birth.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure his birth. Or second, I forgot whether, I'm pretty sure it's his birth. But either way, again, that's also by chance. That happened to be his birthday. But we'll see today that it's not by chance that both holidays come out the same time of year. As Hannah, I guess I taught you this in Shalavim way back, Hannah? Okay, so you get this right. Very good. I'm glad you remember. So, now I want to begin with the source sheet with the second temple period, and I'll show you 2 ways to begin it. I'm going to jump right into. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to jump to a pasuk in the prophet Haggai. Now, again, most students in the Jewish school system might have heard of Haggai if they had to memorize all the prophets by heart, something like that. But some schools actually teach it. The average Jew might have heard of Haggai, might know beginning Second Temple period, but doesn't really remember much what the topic is. But I'm going to jump. It's only 2 chapters in Haggai. It's a real quick siyum if you want to need a reason. But in Haggai, in chapter 2 and verse 10, there's a date here on the 24th day of the 9th month, in the second year of Daryavesh. Haggai has a prophecy. Got it? We have the 24th of Kislev, which is Erev Hanukkah, and skipping all the details of the prophecy. He tells the people, pay attention to this day, Simun Elavavchem, from this day on, the day before they start putting brick on top of brick in God's house. And then he continues to pay attention to your economy, etc. And again, pay attention to that phrase, pay attention. Simun Elavavchem, from this day on, from the day of Erev Chanukah, the 24th of Kislev, from the day Asher Yusarich Al Hashem, from the day they began construction on God's house, pay attention. And then to pay attention to your economy, things will get better. And then there's another nevuah, another Dvar Hashem on the 24th of Kislev, tells Zerubbabel there's going to be a big political upheaval, there'll be big armies falling, a giant military victory, and the Jewish leader is going to return possibly to sovereignty. Now, what did we find? We find this date of Hanukkah to be a super important date in the nevuah of Haggai, and it could be just by chance it's when? It's on the 24th of Kislev. But what's the big historical event that's happening on the 24th of Kislev, according to Haggai? They're breaking ground on the Second Temple. When does the miracle of Hanukkah happen? Later in the Second Temple period, several hundred years later. So again, that could be, again, an amazing coincidence, or it could be there's a deep connection between the beginning of the Second Temple period and the whole topic of Hanukkah. So there's one of two possibilities. Either the fact that the miracle happened of Hanukkah on the 24th of the 24th or 25th of Kislev is just by chance, or it could be that that date is not by chance and it's a special date during the entire Second Temple period. Okay, so that's a point of discussion. But usually it catches people by surprise. Oh wow, there's a nevuah in the beginning of the Second Temple period about breaking ground on the Second Temple, and three nevuot on that day of that temple, like a major event, and Hanukkah itself comes in the in that time period. Now, topic that's the introduction to it. Now, there's no way to prove that in most rabbinic sources don't deal with this. That's what makes it sometimes tricky to teach in in different depends what school system you're in. But you're what I want to point out is that this takes us right to the topic we call redemption, which is a very hot topic nowadays. What does it mean to be in a time period of redemption? Which you can open up a discussion. But the idea, there's a basic idea in the Bible that God has a special relationship with the Jewish people. Ideally, we should be living in a land as a nation. And we not only represent God as a people, as individuals, we also represent God in our community, but primarily we represent God as being a nation in the service of God. And therefore, there's an ideal that one day, as a people, we have our own land, and the land that God set aside for us is the land of Israel. The symbol of our connection to God will be the temple. And therefore, we pray in our liturgy every day to return to Zion, to build the temple. If you daven Shmoneh Esrei every day, you can't not notice that there's a mega theme in Judaism that one day we want to return to our land and rebuild our temple. Okay, I can prove that from the Siddur. Hope I don't have to quote it for you. Now, what happens when you're living in a time period where your goals are not complete? Now, you have a goal of ultimately to reach something, but your goal isn't complete. So how does your goal, the goal of your history or the goal of your relationship with God, how does that relate to your day-to-day life? And what happens when events that relate to that develop? And that's going to take us to what we want to talk about with Hanukkah. Now I'm going to share the main source sheet and talk about the idea of redemption. Up till now, any quick questions, real quick? Okay. Now, in light of this, I want to deal with with the sources. Maybe one last question: are there any Jewish holidays that there's a connection between an historical event and an agricultural time of the year or a calendar?
Most Jewish holidays.
Yeah, exactly, aren't they? Notice we have Hanukkah, our redemption from Egypt is orchestrated to come out in the spring. The Torah being given, our grain harvest, our fruit harvest together with Sukkot. Remember God watching us in the desert. The new year beginning with the beginning of the rainy season. It makes sense that holidays relate to our solar calendar as well as to our history. And the question is, Hanukkah going to be part of that same idea? So let's take a look at our sources real fast. I'll share the screen and let's check the chat. Okay, very good. Purim Yom Ha'atzmaut, right on the mark. I'm going to share my screen again, and we have here we are. We want here outlined for 1 second. Where's my what's up? Here we go. This is our Hanukkah source sheet. Here we go. So again, on the source sheet, which I will share with you for later, we have a quick review of what's called the 7 years of Babylonian exile. But that's not our topic for today. The main thing is that the 7 years of Babylonian exile ends with the Cyrus decree, as Yirmiyahu predicted, that the Jews can come back and build their temple, and the Persians will defeat the Babylonians, and sure enough came true. And they come back, but it only takes about 20 years until they break ground on the Second Temple. Now, here's the big question about what I call two models for redemption, which again, that would be a share in itself. When the Jewish people are in exile and God has a promise of redemption, who is going to take the first step towards redemption? In other words, do the Jewish people sit and wait for redemption to happen and God does it for us? Or do we do it on our own? Again, that's not a topic for our class, but I just brought two sources where Yirmiyahu claims that there'll be a potential of redemption, but if you don't want to return, if you don't do tshuva first, God won't bring you back. So first you have to look for me. You have to want to return, and then God will give you an opportunity. Where Yechezkel gives a motto of, even if you're not ready, because of the fact that you're in exile, and that makes God's name look bad, God might bring you back, even if you're not worthy. I just brought that down for a topic of discussion about what has to happen first in models of redemption. And therefore, the reason I brought that from an educational point of view is that in the Jewish people today, we have people sitting saying we should sit and wait for God to bring us back. We have people saying we have to take the move. It had a view, but there's prophetic sources for both hashkafot, both understandings in modern day Judaism, which is important to appreciate different hashkafot of people. Okay, now, the beginning of the book of Ezra talks about the famous Cyrus decree, which I'm assuming everyone, again, in our webinar now is familiar with, therefore we don't need to read it. But if you teach Chanukah, the most important thing is to remember when the Second Temple begins. Koresh becomes the new Persian emperor, makes his famous decree allowing all the nations to go back to their homelands from where they were exiled from, and build their temples, including the Jewish people. And any Jew has a right to return to Israel under the Cyrus decree, and those staying behind should send presents. Now, unfortunately, even though a small group returns to Yehuda after the Cyrus decree, there's going to be what I call the first intifada, or the local population doesn't let them build. And from the time of Koresh till Daryavesh, there's a building freeze. Again, if you're studying this with the classroom, depending on how much time you have, you can read these sources and have the students make a timeline and follow it. What's important for us is that a group of people return with great hopes for redemption. They're very much looking forward to fulfilling this great theme of redemption that all the prophets talked about. They come to Israel, and it doesn't happen. For some 18 years, almost 20 years, nothing gets off the ground until there's a new king in Persia. His name is Darius or Daryavesh. And now, under the second year of Daryavesh, there's an opportunity to build a temple, and that's where the story of Haggai comes in. Now, I just gave a quick summary because we're going to be studying the book of Haggai, and if you have time, also the Navi Zechariah. And when you study the prophecies of Haggai and Zechariah, if you're not aware of their setting, you can't appreciate their message and their relevance to future time periods. But Haggai begins not just technically in the second year of Daryavesh, it's about 20 years after the first wave of exile returned, after some 20 years of depression, things going terrible, we'll see later on, a bad economy, nothing going well. And you have a large group of people who made the big step of making Aliyah and have returned to Israel and nothing happening. The job of Haggai in the very beginning of Haggai is to give the people hope and telling the people are saying this is not time to build a house for God. And God's telling them it is time to build a house for God. So the first chapter of Zechariah talks about, in a nutshell, he's addressing a bunch of people, a large group of people, who returned thanks to the call of the prophets, thanks to the decree of Cyrus, who are unfortunately very down and depressed and unhappy because nothing's happening. The Navi's telling them, you think you're interpreting these bad events as though God doesn't want you, that this was a mistake. And Haggai says you have it exactly wrong. The reason why things are so bad is because you're not trying hard enough. Make a greater effort, and things can get better. Now, the Haftarah for Hanukkah, again, we read from Zechariah, the opening line, which most students should be familiar with. The Navi, it's the same year. The Navi tells the people, Roni v'simchi, be happy, Bat Zion, the people of Israel, of Zion, because I'm coming and the Shekhinah will return. Again, that's a prophecy of hope. Zechariah and Haggai are colleagues, same time period. And I'm just building this picture that there's a time of great expectation. The overall group of people are down and depressed, and the prophets are trying to give hope. Sure enough, thanks to the encouragement of Haggai, they're able to get together a movement to start working on the second temple. And the people were, I just bring a pasuk which kids know about, what's called chazak, chazak, chazak. So the Navi tells the people, Fatah chazak zu Bavel, you need to be strong. Chazak Yoshua, chazak kol ha'amar. He's giving chizuk to the leader, to the religious leader, to the political leader, and to all the people, because God can be with you. And then the line which Americans who can relate to nowadays, which is make Jerusalem great again, Gedo yeh kvod habayit ha'achron min harishon. This second temple can be greater than the first temple, and God's glory can come to this house again if you So it's God will do his side if you do your side. In light of all that, that sets the stage for the 24th of Kislev. Now, I'm going to stop the share for a minute. What I tried to do is paint a picture that to appreciate the date of the 24th of Kislev, it's not just a technical date in Tanakh. It's a time period where the Jewish people, at least a small group of them, but a significant group, have returned with the great hope of fulfilling this theme of redemption, which hasn't happened yet. The job of the prophets is to encourage them. It can happen, but you have to take an effort. And they actually break ground on the second temple on what we would call Erev Chanukah. Now remember, we light candles on the 24th of Kislev at night, don't we? Well, it's good if the miracle happened on the 25th, we'd be lighting candles on the 26th at night. Well, the one day and the date we can deal with later on. That's a technical problem. But this time of year, for sure, the end of Kislev is key. Now, from the sources, that's the next source. They don't finish building the temple for 4 more years. It takes 4 years to build. I want to talk about why that date is so important. And that gets us to the time of year of Hanukkah. It just so happens that the date they pick to break ground on the second temple, which is in the middle of the winter, which is not really a great time for a building project, just so happens to be more or less the winter solstice. Now, someone tell me why there can't be a winter solstice on a Jewish calendar. Just give me a good, simple reason. Why can't there be a winter solstice on a Jewish calendar?
There's no harvesting. No.
No, what? I hope you know what the winter solstice is.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, what's the winter solstice?
Oh,
It's the shortest day of the year, right?
right.
Or the longest night. That's how you, with your, the winter solstice is when the day is the shortest possible.
So why can't it be?
But on a Jewish calendar, why can't you? You need a solar calendar for a winter solstice, don't you?
Right.
We don't follow that calendar.
Yeah,
It's
Maria.
dependent on the sun. It's dependent on the sun, and because our calendar is a shana, so it's 355 days. It's not 365 days, so it's going to be a different time every year. It would only be the same every 19 years, give or take, depending on, well, if you're following the Gregorian calendar, it could also be 8 years.
Yeah, our calendar is lunar basically, and I can't have on the solar calendar. The solstice is always on the 21st of December. That's what it's built on that. That's why it's a 365 and a quarter day calendar. And to make sure it happens every 100 years, they have a leap year, the whole leap year thing with every February 29th, except on leap years and things like that. But it makes sense that there's no solar. It wouldn't make sense to find a winter solstice date on a lunar calendar, but our calendar is both lunar and solar, isn't it? Because our first month has to be the spring. The spring equinox has to come in the first month, which means by adding a month, by what's called Ibor HaChodesh, Ibor Shana, adding a month, if the spring equinox isn't ready yet, then we add a month, and therefore the winter solstice will come out either in the 9th or 10th month. Now comes the key point, which has to do with astronomy. I'm not going to give a class on astronomy now because that would take too much time. But either you noticed or not, but you can check out one time when you're bored at night. The moon is not out every single night. There's only a full moon once a month, one day a month on the full moon, on the 15th. But on Rosh Chodesh, which is today or was yesterday, or 2 days ago already, on Rosh Chodesh there's no moon at all. You don't see the moon. On the first day of the month, the moon is tiny. And from the first day to the 15th of the month, the moon gets bigger and bigger and rises later and later. But the first half of the month, the moon rises after sunset and is out longer and longer every night. On Rosh Chodesh, or the second day of the month, the moon, as the sun is setting, the moon is setting. You see the moon only in the beginning of the night for the first hour or two. And then like a week later, the moon is out for to about midnight. And then on the full moon, the moon is out all night long. On the second half of the month, the moon doesn't rise until later and later every night. On the 21st day of the lunar month, the moon doesn't rise till midnight. By the 24th or 25th day of the month, the moon doesn't rise till 3 in the morning, and it's getting smaller and smaller. It's waning already. Which means at the end of the month, for all intents and purposes, no one sees the moon. Got it? There's no moon out that night. For the last week of any month are the darkest nights. Now look logically. The winter solstice is not just the shortest day and the longest night, it's also the darkest night, isn't it? If I'm talking about the darkest night, if I take the moon into consideration, what do we find? The darkest time of every month is the last week of the month, the last week of the lunar month. If the winter solstice can either come out in the 9th or 10th Jewish month, then the darkest time of the year in our calendar is the last week of the 9th month going to the 10th month. Hope that makes sense. Again, that's a class in astronomy. Now, if you didn't follow it, just take my word for it. But if I'm looking for the darkest time of the year, and remember, this time of the year, sunrise, sunset doesn't change for a couple of weeks. It's like when Shabbos is the same now for about 3-4 weeks, almost a month. Even 6-7 weeks, it doesn't change. But the darkest night of any month is the last week, and therefore the darkest time of the year is the last week of the 9th month going to the 10th month, which just so happens to be the week of Hanukkah. Got that? In fact, our winter solstice in our lunar solar calendar is better than if I'm talking about the darkest nights of the year, Hanukkah is much better than December 21st. Because sometimes on December 21st, you can have a full moon. The moon can be out. But on our calendar, the week of Hanukkah, there's never a moon, there's no light at night, and the light's long and dark. And guess what the Jewish people do? What's our ancient custom? The darkest week of the year, every winter, what do we do? We light candles. Remember, the original custom was one candle per house, one candle per person. Later, we start adding lights every night. Now, that would be an amazing coincidence, wouldn't it be? That we have this custom of lighting candles during the darkest week of the year, every night adding a candle, and it's just by chance, that just happens to be the week of Hanukkah. We're having too many coincidences happening, and I want to prove it from a famous Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah. Let me go to the source sheet real fast and share again. And here we are. No, I didn't want Chagai. Stop the share. We wanted the different share. Where is our source sheet? Here we are. This one, okay. We had Chagai chapter 2 and chapter 3. We talked about those things. Zechariah has a spiritual message, and here. Masechet Shabbat. We'll go back to this in a minute. So there's I'll do the English, I'll do the Hebrew or English, it's all the same. There's a famous Mishnah that it's forbidden for a Jew to make a business deal with the heathen, with an idol worshiper, close to their holidays so they don't encourage idol worship. And there's a question, what are the holidays? And there are two winter solstice holidays called Kaland and Saturna. One is 8 days before the before the solstice, and the other is 8 days after the solstice, called the Tkufa in Hebrew. And there's a beautiful medrash that the rabbis give us about how these holidays came about. See this one? Lefi Shara Adam Harishon Yom Shemit Beit Ba'olech. And as we read this, you can ask the students also, pay attention to how this sounds so similar to the Hanukkah story. Okay? Adam Harishon saw the days are getting shorter and shorter. Okay? What happened? He was born in Tishrei. Remember? So Tishrei, Cheshvan, all of a sudden in Kislev, the days get shorter and shorter. What's happening? He says oily. Remember, he knew Yiddish. He says, Shema bishvil sisarachti olam chashuch badi. Oh, why is it getting darker and darker every night? How come the nights are getting longer and longer? Maybe that's because of my sin. Right? And if this continues, if this progression continues, there'll be no more light. We'll go back to Tov V'Vo, because what was before there was light? Remember, God said Vayior. Before God said Vayior, everything was Tov V'Vo. Isn't that beautiful the way the rabbis connect that together? Back to creation, okay? And that says, oh, what is this? This must be the death. When God says, if I eat from that apple or from that tree, I'm going to die. He didn't know what death was. Maybe death is a lack of light, and that was the punishment I got from heaven. What did he do? He didn't just accept it. Amad v'yashav chet yamim b'tanitu b'tfilah. He's prayed for 8 days for God to forgive him and to and to bring light back. Right? After 8 days of fasting, what's he notice? He saw, hey, the winter solstice and the day's getting longer. Amar, oh, this is minagosh olam. This is this nature. Okay? And he made an 8-day holiday. Okay? The next year, he made both of these, the 8 days he fasted and the 8 days he celebrated, he made them both holidays. Okay? He made them l'shem shamayim, to thank God for creation and life and letting him live and giving him life. So that it started as a nice holiday, and it turned out later to become a pagan holiday called Saturnalia, which if you know your Roman sources and Greek sources, that was a big Roman pagan holiday of people getting drunk and intoxicated, etc. Now, what's similar between this and Hanukkah? Someone tell me? Let's stop the share for a minute. Everyone understand that Gemara, that Midrash? First of all, the Midrash is beautiful, isn't it? Everyone can relate to it. But you see the idea of depression, things, remember darkness, depression, things getting worse and worse, and then the turnaround moment and giving light and celebrating the darkest time of the year. What the Gemara is saying is human beings or society, civilization, celebrating the winter solstice makes perfect sense. The question is, how do you celebrate? So the pagan custom was to celebrate with wild parties and getting drunk, and that's pretty much the New Year custom to this day. That was called Saturnalia. You can read about it in Wikipedia. Some people try to reinstitute it even. But I can take the darkest time of the year and focus on depression, giving up hope, etc., or I can turn it into a holiday of giving up of there is hope and there's recovery. Now, what's the biggest similarity between this and the Hanukkah story? Besides the time of the year.
8 days.
Yeah, 8 days. Where did the 8 days come from? It could have been 5 days, 6 days, or 7. All of a sudden, there's an 8 day, 8 days before, 8 days after. So there's something relating to Hanukkah here. Now, are there 8 days? Are there any 8 days related to the temple itself or to the Mishkan when the temple was first built?
Yeah, Yom HaShmini. That's when the Mishkan was originally built on the 8th day, that was a big celebration, and Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah. And what was that celebration called? Chanukah HaMizbeach, which is a Torah reading for Hanukkah. Remember, Zot Chanukah HaMizbeach b'Yom HaMishachoto. There's 7 days of preparation. On the 8th day, it's called when they dedicate the temple, called Chanukah HaMizbeach. It's a Torah reading for Hanukkah. See, all these things can't be by chance. That we're not reading it only because the word Hanukkah is there. And if you know the source in the Book of Maccabees, well, it's even perfect because the celebration is for dedicating the not just the menorah, but primarily the altar that was defiled by the Greeks, and they rebuilt a whole new one, and they picked a day on purpose. So what I'm getting at is that at the very beginning of the Second Temple period, the very groundbreaking of the Second Temple begins on this day. It's a time of year when people are down and depressed, and what the Second Temple is all about in the very beginning is about giving people hope in times of darkness for a future redemption that's only in its fledgling state, just beginning, with people like way backwards, like nowhere near the ultimate goal, but not giving up hope. And all of Haggai's prophecies, if we had time, we'd see them more in detail. What are they all about? They're all about the idea that even though things are really bad now, things can get better. Even though our economy is falling apart, no one can make a living, nothing's growing. Get to work on the temple, and your economy will pick up, and your crops will grow again, and you'll become prosperous again. And even though you're under foreign rule, get to work on the temple, and God will organize events, and you'll return to sovereignty after big political upheavals and what he calls earthquakes, but he's referring to political upheavals with big armies falling and empires falling. And most likely it was those nevuot which could have happened early in Jewish history in the Second Temple period, don't happen because the people didn't take enough initiative, only happen in the time of the Hasmonean revolt some 200 years later. Now, if we don't, there's a whole big topic when you read the Book of Maccabees, already you get all the sources, and you'll see that when the Maccabees, after 3 years of rebelling against the Greeks, finally cleaned up the temple, it's not that they finished the battle on the 25th of Kislev. It was very different. They finished the battle a month beforehand. They made everything brand new. It wasn't just the menorah topic. They made everything new in the temple, and they purposely dedicated the temple on that day, on the 25th of Kislev. Also because the Greeks, or not just the Greeks, the Jewish Hellenists, when they defiled the temple 3 years earlier, they picked that date also to defile it. So again, that's already more into history when you study the Book of Maccabees, where the date must have been really important because the date that it was defiled by the Hellenist Greeks or the Hellenist Jews, supported by the Greeks, they defiled the temple on that day, and they rededicated the temple purposely on that day. So we see the day, and they make an 8-day celebration for a similar reason. Now, one last source, and then I'll leave everything back to Sarah. The famous source in Gemara of the Gemara that everyone learns about what's Hanukkah all about, the miracle of Hanukkah. My Chanukah, right? The Ten Rabbanan. When the Greeks came into the temple, because they touched everything, all the oil in the temple became impure. When the Hasmoneans won the victory after 3 years of battle, and they wanted to light the menorah again, they checked, but cool, and they only found pachachat shel shemen, one little container of oil, which had the seal of the Kohen Gadol. And there's only enough oil to light the menorah for one day. They probably have little, like we have, containers for one day at a time. Naseb bon nes, the miracle was with that, we'll talk about the nes in America, and they lit from it for 8 days. And the next year they made the Shana Acheret, the next year, they made him Yom Tovim. Notice the similarity. The next year, after this event, they made it a holiday. See the same thing? The Shana Acheret, the next year, right? They made the holiday. Adam Rishon made the holiday the Shem Shemaim. You can't miss the connection between the Midrash about Hanukkah and the Midrash of Adam Rishon. Now, how many people, when they studied the miracle of Hanukkah, understood it as a story of they found a little container of oil, they lit the menorah, and the menorah lasted for 8 days? There's a Maccabee song like that, isn't there? Now, is that what the Gemara said or not? What did the Gemara say? The miracle wasn't that the menorah lasted for 8 days. What happened? You have to read that Gemara carefully. The miracle was not in the menorah. Where was the miracle in?
In the flask of oil.
In the flask of oil. Understand why? Because the mitzvah is to light the menorah every day. If you follow the halacha, you light the menorah at night, and you put enough oil to the morning. In the morning, it's extinguished, and then you light it again the next night. The menorah is only lit from the erev ad boker, as the Torah says. You light the menorah from evening to morning. And the mitzvah is to light it every day. Remember, you do what's called hatavat nerot in the morning. You clean it, fill the oil, and don't light it. In the evening, you come in and light it. Now, the miracle wasn't in the menorah. The miracle was in the pak. It says so. V'neseh bon nes. The miracle was in the pak. The pak is zachar. The menorah would be nekeva. And they lit from that pak. It's like that little cask. Now, does anyone know a miracle in Tanakh that sounds very similar? There's a miracle in Tanakh that's very
Elisha
similar.
with the oil?
What? The Haftarah, isn't it?
Elisha.
Yeah. Elisha, there was this lady whose husband was a prophet who was probably killed by Zebel. She's an almana, she's a widow. And the moneylenders, she can't pay back her debts. They take her children into slavery. And she cries to Elisha, hey, it's not fair what's happening to me. And what's Elisha say? What do you have at home? I've got little container of oil. I think it's chapter 4. There's a little container of oil. And what they choose is go borrow kelim from your neighbors and use that thing of oil, that little cask of oil, fill up all the vessels you borrowed from your friends, sell the oil, and pay your debts back. But you see a very similar miracle happening, where oil was a symbol of hope. Remember, when someone's down, depressed, everything falling apart, and the miracle of oil is a sign of hope in times of darkness. So if we're asking, why is Haggai making this celebration? Why is he breaking ground and giving this fiery speech about great hopes for Beit Sheni at the darkest time of the year? Most likely it's because the time of the year is fitting for the prophetic message. In other words, if you're giving a prophetic message, I'll give you an example. Passover, it's a redemption, a new start in our history. We're off to a new start. Just like spring, a new season's beginning. Things begin to grow. So there's a logic between redemption, Passover being in the spring. And you can do the same thing with all the other holidays. But if the second temple is typified by unrealized hopes of redemption, where there's a promise of redemption, far from fulfilled, where there's a potential to fulfill it, but people can't give up hope. And the Navi wants to emphasize, don't give up hope in times of darkness. Making a groundbreaking ceremony at the darkest time of the year can give a lot of meaning to that ceremony. Now, almost all the holidays that were celebrated during the Second Temple period, called Megillat Tanit, were all nullified when the temple was destroyed. The bigger question isn't why celebrate Hanukkah in the first place. It was when Hanukkah was first celebrated. It was like someone mentioned Yom Ha'atzmaut. The original Hanukkah in the Second Temple period was very similar to Yom Ha'atzmaut. It was marking a great military victory, a return to sovereignty after being under Greek rule. Remember this great Hasmonean revolt going up against all odds, and the Jewish people, for the first time in the Second Temple period, regained sovereignty and defeated a great enemy, and took control of their country, and was celebrated as a military victory for sure. Now, in fact, in all the sources of the Second Temple period, the sources don't even mention the miracle of the menorah. Now, the miracle of the menorah is more of a rabbinic source. Now, why continue celebrating your return to sovereignty in the Second Temple period?
Rabbi Leibtag?
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, sure.
When you're saying the sources mention mostly the military victory and not the oil, you're saying the sources in Megillat Ta'anit?
No, this is in Megillat Tanit, and also Megillat Tanit has this one also. Megillat Tanit talks about the military victories as well, but in Sefer HaMaccabim.
Okay.
In the book of Maccabees, which is part of the Apocrypha, but the Maccabees 1 and 2 are very religious. They're written by firm people. They wouldn't hide the miracle. They're doing everything to say God behind the events. But the miracle of the menorah is a secondary event. It's not a reason for the holiday. It's a sign the holiday's from God. Because if the miracle was in the Pach HaShemen, how many people would know about it? Maybe a couple priests in the temple. It's a rumor. It's not a miracle everyone sees. The military victory everyone sees everyone sees the military victory, and that's the reason to celebrate. I don't need the Nes Pach HaShemen to have a holiday to celebrate a military victory for at least for that generation or two. The question is going to be what makes it a holiday for future generations, especially after the temple is being destroyed. That's where the Nes Pach HaShemen comes in. The miracle of the menorah gives meaning to the holiday of light in the times of darkness. So if the rabbis are going to keep celebrating a military victory hundreds of years after we lost our sovereignty and hundreds of years into exile, and that old sovereignty is gone, there's no logical reason to continue a celebration of a military victory, return to sovereignty, if we're in exile and not sovereign. But if the message of Hanukkah is the Jewish people don't give up hopes of their ideas of redemption, even in the darkest times of our history, then the Jewish people remembering that great victory and the return to sovereignty against all odds, no matter how bad things were, and every year, at the darkest nights of the year, lighting candles for 8 days and adding light, a little extra light every night. That's the we'll get to. I'm sure everyone knows that Gemara about the Ner Ishu Beito. The original custom, was a candle each person for family, and then a candle for every person. Finally, Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, we add a candle every night, or make one less every night. But we go follow Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel, we add a candle every night. In the darkest time of the year, what do? Every night we add a little more light, and by the time we get to the 8th day of Hanukkah, which is the 2nd day of Tevet, we have a lot of light in our homes, and from then on, the moon takes over, doesn't it? And the days start getting longer, and nature takes over. The whole idea that at the darkest time of the year, when people are naturally down and depressed, especially in our Jewish history, we take that time of year and do something symbolic, say, never give up hope of redemption. And there's a future for the Jewish people, no matter how bad things are. It's such a core Jewish message, which is being kept by Hanukkah in a super deep way. And that makes Hanukkah meaningful for all generations. We're not celebrating just the Hasmonean victory. We're celebrating the concept that there's always light. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. In Judaism, we never give up on long-term hopes, even though we can't fulfill them now. We always remember the darkest times of the year. That in the darkest times of our history, there's always hope, and we never give up hope. So that's the key idea we're going across. Again, I told you there's tons and tons of sources. We could spend hours, but my time is up. I just try to get the idea across. Now I'll end with one little point, which is a educational one. What are the kids going to ask? Oh, did the miracle really happen? You follow? I always get that because when you read too many sources, you read the Book of Maccabees and you do academic work, most people start questioning whether the miracle really happened, which is really difficult for students who think the whole reason for the holiday is because of the miracle. So if the miracle didn't happen, why celebrate Hanukkah? In my opinion, they have it all wrong. Why? I'll be sort of again, don't get me wrong. Let's say you're convinced, the student's convinced it didn't happen, and the rabbis make up the miracle. That makes it more important to light Hanukkah candles. You understand? If the miracle is the message of light in the times of darkness, then that midrash about Adam HaRishon, which is exactly like the midrash about the Chanukah, the idea that we celebrate the holiday for all generations because of a miracle happening about giving light in our temple at the darkest time of the year, the miracle gives meaning to the holiday even after the destruction of the temple. So even if the reason for a holiday is not because of the miracle of the menorah, the miracle of the menorah is to give meaning to the holiday. So it has nothing to do with whether the miracle was made up or really happened or not. Because the reason for a holiday is not the miracle that happened. The reason for a holiday is Jewish history and Jewish redemption and the theme of the Torah. But again, that's really difficult to explain to children, even sometimes to adults. But it's something to think about. And teachers have to be aware of that. Be careful what you teach sometimes, because sometimes you do too good a job and the kids won't appreciate the message. So I'm sharing that with you as adults and as teachers. So you always have to know your audience and who you're talking to. So there's different methods of teaching it. I brought up the question, if you teach too much academia, the kids are going to catch on to something. So the best solution is don't teach it. If you don't have an answer for it, just keep the simple sources. You can study Chagai and not get into the question. Now, the Haftarah for Hanukkah puts icing on the cake. That's the menorah part. But that's too political. If you were Israelis, I would I would teach Israelis that remember Lo B'chai V'Lo B'Koach Im Ruchi, the vision that Zechariah has. He has a menorah vision, which is the Haftarah for Hanukkah, at the same year, second year of Dayavesh, and he sees the menorah lighting, and Zechariah doesn't understand what it's about. And God's answer is, Chayil means prosperity, Koach means military strength. He says, the vision of the menorah that Zechariah sees is telling the people the redemption is not only about military victory, not only about economic prosperity, it's about ruach. It's about giving meaning to Jewish life. In other words, if you're celebrating, whenever you celebrate return to sovereignty, sovereignty is not the goal. The goal is ruchaniyut. The goal is spirituality. Now, I need a sovereign state to be a nation representing God. So the rabbis are adding what Zechariah is saying is that if you're gonna rebuild the second temple and you have great hopes for return to prosperity and sovereignty, make sure that's not your ultimate goal. Those are tools to achieve a greater goal. And therefore it's not only about koach and chayil, it's about ruach. And that's already a bigger message that you can celebrate sovereignty and return, but without becoming a nation that serves God properly and acts in a way that sanctifies God, then you haven't used your sovereignty properly. But that's that takes us to political issues, so I don't want to get into. Okay, anyway, Sarah, take over from here, okay? And I'll stop.
Thanks for Leibtag, and thanks for leaving me with that political.
Yeah, I don't want to I'll get myself in trouble. You have no idea where I'm going to go with that. That's not my job to give a listeners votes. Okay.
Thank you so much for that inspiring and enlightening shiur. Speaking of knowing your audience, before we proceed, why don't we all share where we're teaching, or if we're not currently teaching, the age bracket that we would like to be teaching. Let's start with, okay, Lynn, you already shared that you're not currently teaching at the moment, but what age group do you envision yourself teaching?
Adult, probably.
Okay, great. Rebecca?
I teach high school, but currently in public school, but I do also do adult education on Shabbat, and I'm planning to use this for a Shabbat shiur on
Great.
Hanukkah.
Okay. Okay, we're down to one Alana, so I don't need a last name. Alana. You're on mute.
Yes. Also adults.
Adults. Okay. Maria.
I teach third grade currently.
Okay, great. Hannah, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm an aspiring teacher. I would love to teach high school. I would love to give shiur in my community. Um, Getting there.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, so let's pause for a minute and try to tease out some of the big ideas that we learned from Rabbi Leibtag. There were a lot of things that came up in this year. What were the, the kind of the main themes that came out? Let's put them in the chat. It's a great quote. Okay. I'm just putting your ideas here onto the PowerPoint. Um, okay. All right, so we came up with some excellent big ideas here. Sorry, my oops, 1 second. Okay, there you go. So the three main themes that emerged from what I saw in the chat, hope in dark times, the importance of the time period of Hanukkah, to emphasize the theme of hope in dark times. So the historical context being part of the big idea there, and the importance of studying all the Tanakh in order to understand the holidays. So we really can only get a full picture if we have, better familiarity with the stories in Tanakh. Okay, so how can we then take these big ideas and turn them into what we at Herzog call the core of a lesson? We spent a lot of time developing this methodology that we call the core. Core is an acronym. It stands for connection, relevance, and engagement. And it basically is the backbone of a lesson, which derives from either a text or a main concept that we're teaching. And it connects the students and the teacher to the content that we are learning. So these big ideas are great. We're adults, we process the shiur in our adult minds, but how are we going to channel this in a way that it can form the backbone of a lesson for our students who are all different ages, right? And even if we're teaching adults, right, they're going to hear it through our prism, right? Not through the same prism that we heard it. So when we're thinking about how to take a big idea and turn it into a core, we're thinking about what is going to connect us as the teacher to and the students and the content. So we have to keep in mind who our audience is and what our content is, right? So like Rabbi Menachem said, when we're weighing whether or not to bring in the academic sources, right, a lot of that will depend on who we're speaking to and what they're able to handle. We also want to make sure that what we're teaching is relevant and engaging to the students where they are in their lives. And we want them to actively engage with the text and with the content themselves, and not just feed it to them. Okay, so these are the cores that I came up with in preparing. I'll leave it up on the screen so that you can read them, but they're essentially the same idea as your big ideas. I framed them as sentences because I thought that was important to create like a full picture of what we're trying to achieve. Okay. And so now here we get to the interactive part of the workshop. So we're going to take one of our cores. I took one that I wrote, which was understanding, you also brought it up, but understanding the historical context is essential when studying Jewish rabbinic holidays. How can we take that big idea, that core concept, and funnel it into a core that will be like functional and usable for a lesson for our students? So when formulating it, I need to think about who my students are. And this, in my mind, while I was preparing this, my students were middle school students, okay, in a Jewish day school. And I wanted them to think, to connect to the idea on a level that was not just historical, and not just, content related that they could check off a box that they understand what Hanukkah is, but something that they can actually internalize and take with them, even after Hanukkah. So the sentence that I came up with is that Hanukkah doesn't just remind us of the past, it gives us hope for the future. So you see the same idea is expressed here. It's just expressed in a way that would speak to my middle school students. And I'm going to challenge all of you to take the core, either the one that you came up with in the chat or a different one that you saw that resonated with you, and to come up with a core statement that you could use for your students, whether they're your actual students or a group of students that you imagine in your head. So take a couple minutes and then we'll share.
Sarah, you reminded me of something. Forgot to mention. If you study those outside sources, it turns out that Christmas was really not when he was born. It was a pagan holiday, Saturnalia, that the Romans changed into when the Romans became frum, when they became Christian. They took Saturnalia, the winter solstice holiday, which was like a pagan holiday, and they turned it into a Christian holiday. So they took basically they did. That was their real source. The Saturnalia is the source for both. The winter solstice is the source for both holidays, but they kept to a solar calendar, so it stayed on there. That was just a little technical thing. That when you teach adults, that adults are amazed by that. When you realize that the reason for Christmas is exactly the same, not the same reason we have, but the same reason that they did the same. They did something similar. They took that time of the year and they turned it into a religious holiday. That was just a cute little anecdote.
And we both get presents.
And that's why I call it the Prophet Who Stole Chanukah, because it's the Grinch Who Stole Christmas. But that was that's for people in America who know the story. Anyway, sorry about that. Just go back to your.
Thanks for that.
Okay, sure.
Anybody want to share their core? And I recognize that this is like a crash course in how to develop this. We actually have a course that we're starting in January for anybody who might be interested. That's part of our TTCP program. On how to really develop this methodology of coming up with a core. Maria, what did you come up with?
Okay, so I teach third graders. So I know that I can't go too deep into the sources, especially with my specific students. They don't necessarily come from backgrounds and they don't necessarily have the prior knowledge. So if I told them that this was in the Second Temple era, during the Second Beis Hamikdash, they would not know what that meant.
Okay.
So so I already have to work from, okay, what do they know and how do they connect? They do know about Hanukkah. They've been in Jewish schools, and we're in America. That is one of the most celebrated holidays in America in terms of.
You just have to go to Target. You don't have to go to a Jewish school.
Right. So the interesting thing is, because we're in Florida, it's not so dark.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but I would like to, bring that connection and say, because okay, even though it's not so very dark, it still is darker than most of the year. And they also, a lot of them travel to different places. So they do have a concept of it being a darker time of the year. And also, in the world right now, there are a lot of things that are happening that are figuratively dark. And so
Right. I
how
think you tapped into something really important there.
Right. So I think that it'd be nice for them to make the connection on that level of bringing hope to the world, and light into their lives. And so um, maybe like on a personal level to be like, okay, how can I be like a Hanukkah candle and bring light to the world? Because like, in previous generations, it started where, it was like, one candle per family and then one candle per person. So we could say, okay, how are you that candle for this world?
Really nice. Lovely idea, lovely lesson plan. I'd love to hear how you end up fine-tuning that one sentence that's going to be the core for you. So keep thinking
Okay,
about how
so
to develop that.
I guess,
Rebecca, what are you thinking?
So first, when Maria was speaking, I was thinking that although I teach in public school, we do have a Jewish club that we do once a week. And the idea of adding light is one that we talk about a lot in terms of trying to be a little neutral in our, not too religious in our Judaism in terms of like what we're allowed to do in public school. So I think that's a nice idea to bring in. What gets me a little bit concerned about that message, though, is it's so universal. And especially in New York, we try to make like everybody has the same religious observances. So I think it's important to put it in the historical context for adults and people who are willing to hear that in terms of it's like it's different than the secular kind of just light holidays that we have in the winter. So it's nice how we have that added Jewish message in. And I think for the women I work with, we've been thinking a lot over the past couple of years of how relevant Tanakh is to our lives and how the lives that we live now are already written about in the Tanakh. And this idea of the incomplete redemption or what to do in a time where we have the incomplete redemption, I think that would probably be the core that we would go for.
Wow.
That would
Okay.
probably resonate most with them.
Okay. And from there, you'd go into more of the historical and Tanakh-based sources.
Right. And looking at, each holiday has its own theme. So looking at Hanukkah as the holiday of celebrating incomplete redemption, or what is the message of an incomplete redemption,
Mhm.
as opposed to, like Torah, like Shavuot is about getting the Torah. And what does that mean? So this is, hey, in Judaism, we have hope even when it's not full. And then maybe those two nivuot of, do we have to bring on the Geulah, or is it like given to us? And I think probably go with that.
Very nice. Very nice. I saw, Rabbi Leibtag, on your source sheet, you had the Yirmiyahu also, and was it Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel about the tshuva first or redemption first?
Yeah.
So that could be really nice and relevant to what Rebecca's referring to.
Mhm.
We'll send that out in the follow-up mail. Okay, and Alana.
I'm in Israel, and I actually like the, light in the dark times, because I feel like it's been a tough time for the last couple of years. And, someone was speaking today and saying, it's still hard in Gaza and still lots going on. And I like the idea of Hanukkah being a real pick me up and sort of, the Tanakh connection and the depression and sort of bringing hope in that sense.
Nice. Okay. Do you have like a sentence in mind that you would use as the core?
Yeah, Hanukkah helps us deal with dark times, or something like that.
Nice. Okay. Practical.
I have to say that it connects me with something I heard in the name. I think it's the fifth Chabad rabbi, the Rashab. He brought the parable that a person should be, in Hebrew they say panasai. There's obviously a word in Yiddish for that he probably used that I don't know, which is the person that used to light well, I guess it was fire, candles in the street lights, street lamps, which they had, which is not only being the candle itself, but it's the person who lights the candle. So to take initiative and to try and be the one who actually does something, plug in your own something.
Very nice.
You're on mute.
Amichai's quote from Dumbledore was the best one. Yeah.
Yes.
Happiness can be
Yes,
found.
I screenshotted it. That could
Right
definitely be
on
added
that.
into
Okay.
everyone's lessons.
Yeah.
Perfect core. Okay, Lynn, what have you come up with?
I think I would probably take an approach similar to Rebecca's. So um, the incomplete redemption and the idea that the lessons of the Second Temple period for our modern times are sort of themes that resonate with me.
Very nice. Hannah? Okay. All right, Hannah said she's going to type something out, so I'm going to read it because her Wi-Fi wasn't great. I would connect, this is Hannah's voice, I would connect this idea to history from the past, the anticipated ideas for the future, and now back to the current present. It's been a real tough time for Am Yisrael, and now even in New York with all the elections and the scary unknown future, and yet remind my future students about this powerful idea, that no matter what is going on around us, we need this hope. It's a beautiful idea. So we can whittle that down to one sentence, right? That Hanukkah really reminds us of the hope that we had in the past, and also hope for the future also. So thank you for that, Hannah. Okay, so once we have our core, and we actually already touched on this, but once we have our core, then we're going to develop our lesson objectives and our goals, what we want our students to know and to think about, and how we want them to relate to the text, and of course, what we want them to be able to do. And from there, we will develop the activities, the text that we're going to use, right? We obviously are not going to just replicate the same source sheet because it wouldn't be appropriate for all of our audiences, even if we're teaching adults. So we have to really think carefully and curate our own source sheets with the sources that really touched on our core specifically. I think that's part of the beauty of the core. It really focuses me on what sources I'm choosing to bring into my students. And of course, like what materials you'll need in order to be successful in your lesson. Before I show you my sample lesson, any thoughts on activities that would work well for your students with this core?
I think that it'd be really nice to have the students with mine come up with something that they could actually like practically do, and then actually carry it out. So things that are practical, like let's say they want to do a soup kitchen, then they can actually literally do this, like have the soup kitchen. So like part of their activity would be to build out the plan and then execute it.
Really nice. To actually be the light. Nice. Anybody else want to share? Okay. So I will send you this, but I came up with a sample lesson plan. Actually, let me do it this way. Sorry. It's probably easier. Okay. It's developed for grades 7 through 9. Can you see my screen okay? That's too small. Good. Okay. So with this core, that Hanukkah doesn't just remind us of the past, it gives us hope for the future. I would stick for these, middle, early high school students, I would stick with one text, which is the text from Haggai. I would expect that they could read it, that they would be able to identify. I also thought it would be cool to do, bring in a little science, like a visual of the solar calendar and also of the lunar calendar, so you can really see the cycle of the moon without getting too distracted by it. But that could be something that will really help them visualize what we're talking about, not just a date on a calendar, but when we go outside, what do we see? Go into a little bit about the historical significance so that they would appreciate that. And then for them to really reflect and think about the importance of adding light during dark times. So one thing that I would want them to have the Tanakh source sheets in Hebrew and if needed in English. I also thought that they would need biographies of who's who. They may not know who Darius is, who Zerubbabel is, and who Haggai was. So just to make sure that they have access to that information, in a short sheet with bios instead of having to teach it to them. And then maybe a page from a solar calendar to help them visualize those things. So Maria, you were wondering what your students already know about Hanukkah. So one way to find out is to do like a mind map or a KWL chart with them to help them, so like to get their free associations with Hanukkah coming out, to see what they actually do remember and what their questions are, what they might want to focus on. And hopefully in that process, somebody will mention the date of Hanukkah, which will be your opener to the rest of the lesson. So at this age, I would have the students work in Chavruta, read the text, highlight the date, because that's important. That's what I want them to focus on. And during that Chavruta time, they would also have the opportunity to read the bio so they know who they're talking about. And then to have them go through like a bit of a time machine in a discussion to think about what the time period looked like, what Am Yisrael were dealing with during that time, especially people who were actually in Israel, and to think about the message that would be for the future. And the ending activity here for this short lesson would be a time capsule. What would they want their future selves to think and know about Hanukkah? So that ties it in forward a little bit as well. So thinking about what the date means, what it means for them now, and what it could mean for them in the future. So that's just a quick sample, maybe something to think about. But if anybody would like to speak further or explore any of these ideas in further detail, I'm here, happy to answer questions, as with Amichai, and we're happy to be a resource for you guys. All right. Thank you all for your time, for your attention, and we'd love to be in touch.